Me and my girlfriend have never fought, we get along fine. We have been living together for 9 years now, and have been dating for 12 years. We have a healthy sex life, we both have decent jobs that bring in decent money. In the past we talked about marriage a lot and would often joke about what our wedding would be like. Yes, I know how stupidly lame this sounds, however we always agreed we needed to settle down first. We bought a house about 1.5 years ago, and were finally able to settle down. Our work schedules normalized, we were able to remove a huge waste of time from commuting. And we were finally able to take various activities after work, e.g., dancing classes, cooking classes, etc. We were able to finally settle down. Finally we decided to take a week off and unplug on the week of 12-year anniversary. She wanted to go camping and hiking, and do the things we used to do when we were first dating. Unbeknownst to her, I secretly decided to pick the exact same area where we met to do our hiking / camping trip. 2 weeks ago as we are leaving she realizes where we are going and becomes ecstatic, and gushes about how romantic I am. More or less everything seems perfect. We do our hike, and we unpack, set up, and by sundown everything feels perfect. So I decided to pop the question. This is where everything kind of falls apart. I ask her, and she just says no. We literally went from I love yous to the single most awkward silence I have ever had in my life in the time span of about a minute. We sat there kind of not saying anything before she says she is tired and goes to bed. She basically proceeds to cry herself to sleep while I sat there doing nothing. I basically didn't sleep, and the next morning, she says she wants to go home. So we pack up and have a really awkward 3-hour hike back to our car. There were a few times where things kind of felt normal and we were joking around like we used to be for a bit. On the way back home, we are talking and chatting normally, but it just feels awkward. At one point we stopped for coffee, and asked if she wanted to talk about what happened, and all I got was a curt no. This is followed by another extremely long silence for the rest of the drive home. We finally get home and I unpack everything while she goes off to bed. She is going to bed. Cue more crying. I tried really hard to talk to her, but she pretty much told me that she just needs time to be alone and think. The next day she tells me she is going to take some time and see her family, which is literally on the other side of the country. It has been about 2 weeks since I dropped her off at the airport. She sent me a few messages to tell me she is fine, and that she needs some more time to think. Her best friend has been asking me every other day about what is going on with her, since she hasn't really been responding at all. I know she is okay, though, due to her posting some pictures of her and her family on Instagram. But it just feels really weird. I am an absolute giant mess. I just don't quite understand what is going on. None of my friends have really offered me anything of value. I just feel if I didn't ask the question everything would be absolutely fine, and I don't really understand what is going on. I keep wanting to grab her laptop to try and figure out anything. I am not close to her parents at all, but I trust her and want to respect her space, but I don't know when she is coming back. I even sent her a message this morning, and I know she saw the message and received it, but hasn't replied. Also, her work has called me this morning asking about where she is. Apparently she had taken an extra week off last week, but she was supposed to be in yesterday. Now everything feels like it is falling apart and I have no idea what to do. The reason why it took so long for us to get married is we both agreed we wouldn't move to the next step until we finished the following. We both finished school. For her that wasn't until 2 years ago. We both had stable jobs. We had a place where we could agree would be good enough to take stuff to the next step. We both had decent working hours. For a long time she was doing her residency and we more or less worked opposite shifts. We did talk about marriage and kids, and both agreed it would be part of the next step after we got settled. Background about my sister. 2 years ago, my sister was killed in a car accident. She was riding with a friend to the mall, the friend's parent was driving, and teenage boy plowed through a red light while texting on his phone and hit the car my sister, Carrie, was in. Carrie was killed instantly and her friend, June, was in a coma for 3 weeks before her parents took her off life support. When Carrie passed I was devastated and angry and just not in a good place. Carrie and I had been extremely close. Despite a 7-year age gap between us, we enjoyed a lot of the same shows. We went to concerts together. We volunteered together, and I took it upon myself to guide Carrie like any big sister would do. Our parents were extremely busy with work most days, and Carrie and I would often cook together and do crafts when we weren't too busy with school work. Carrie wanted to be a NICU nurse when she grew up, and I helped her find a volunteer position at a local hospital to help get her gain some experience being around patients. In short, Carrie was my sister and best friend, and when she passed, I was a mess. The last craft Carrie and I made together was a set of candles. We bought the wax at a local craft store, and we both made each other a candle and decorated the jar it was in. That was the day before she was killed. At her funeral, Carrie was buried with the candle I made her. The candle Carrie made me sits on my desk next to my favorite picture of her and I together at the beach. Or it did, until last week. Background about my boyfriend. I met my boyfriend about 1.5 years ago, about 6 months after Carrie passed. I wasn't looking for a relationship, I was still grieving my sister's death. But Eugene came along, and it was love at first sight. He was extremely supportive, let me cry on him when I needed to, didn't push me into getting over grieving or anything. He was extremely gentleman about everything and very, very patient. After 6 months of seeing each other pretty regularly, we made it official. Eugene came into my life at a very low point, and he has always been very respectful of sentiments I keep from my sister. Never asking me to take them down, always giving me space when I needed to cry. Eugene, along with most, if not all, of my friends and family know about Carrie's candle. There was a point after she died where I would take the candle with me everywhere out of fear that someone might light it, or steal it. Or who knows what. The point is, that candle was and still is a very important part of my life, and something that my sister made for me and me alone. When Eugene and I moved in together about 4 months ago, I packed away most of the reminders of my sister and put out the candle and picture on my desk. I felt that this was a huge step because when I'd lived just by myself I had pictures everywhere and a few knickknacks laying around from my sister. I wanted to make Eugene and I's home our home with just a small part of my sister there. Eugene understood and was very supportive. Last week, we had a massive winter storm that knocked out power. We didn't have power for 3+ days. The power was knocked out at Eugene and I's house while I was at work, which did not lose power. Eugene texted me that he was going to light some candles and try and get a generator, so we could have some for of power or at least be able to charge our phones / use lights / etc. Now, we have probably 30+ candles in our house. I am a huge fan of sales, and when Bath & Body Works has a candle sale, I like to stock up and get a range of scents. We have candles scattered all over our house. In the room where my desk is, there are no candles aside from the one Carrie made me. None at all, and there never has been. This room is also downstairs, where Eugene doesn't spend a lot of time, his desk is upstairs. When I arrived home from work last week, I noticed a bunch of candles burning in our living room, safely. Always monitored and not near anything that could ignite. One of these candles was the candle that Carrie had made me. I burst into tears, and when Eugene heard me crying he came out from the bedroom, where he was lighting more candles, and asked what was wrong. I was a wreck and couldn't get any words out. When he tried to calm me down, I shoved past him and locked myself in the room where my desk was and just cried. I don't know how he could be so stupid. He knew, and I thought he understood how sentimental the candle was and how much I cherished having a candle that my now deceased sister had spent time making with me just a day before she was killed. I haven't been able to speak to Eugene since it happened, Tuesday of last week. He has tried to explain why he did it, because he needed candles to be able to see, but I just can't wrap my head around it. He hadn't gotten into the large candle stash I have upstairs right by the living room where Carrie's candle was, but went downstairs, out of the way to grab the most sentimental, cherished item I have. The candle was burning most of the day while I was at work and is now melted and pretty much gone. I do still have the jar it was in, but I can't look at it without bursting into tears. Eugene says it was an accident, but I just don't believe that. He said he was getting around to lighting the candle surplus we have upstairs, but just hadn't gotten there yet. After being home 6 hours alone with no power, I am heartbroken and feel like this is a major slap in the face. I feel disrespected. I feel like he disrespected my sister. I just don't know what to do. I don't feel like I can forgive him for this. I am a 51-year-old male, and I have 3 children, 1 girl, 1 boy, and 1 child is gender neutral. My son Eric is the oldest, Eva is the middle child, and Charlie is my youngest. I'm still very new to the whole LGBTQ thing, so please correct me if I say something wrong. Now sadly, when the children were all young, their mother / my wife passed away in a car accident, and I've been raising them by myself ever since, as I've chosen to never remarry since my wife was / is the love of my life. I'll say I'm definitely not a perfect father, but I've done the best I could to raise my children. Now Eva has always been a bit more wild than her other siblings even before her mother's passing. I've tried everything, ranging from having sit-down talks with her to putting her in therapy, as well as taking parenting classes and reading books to see what I could possibly do to help. Therapy did seem to help a little bit, but decided to stop soon after she turned 18. Now let me tell you the story as to why I'm here now. My daughter Eva still lives with me and Charlie as she goes to school, and has definitely been home more due to the pandemic, but has started to go out more now that they are letting up on some of the regulations. Now I was out getting dinner with an old high school buddy of mine when I get a panicked call from my son, who had been at my house hanging out with his siblings. To summarize what he told me, he got into an argument with Eva and Charlie sided with him. Eva became very volatile and even called Charlie a slur, which is a big hell no for me. So I headed home and tried to calm everything down. I told Eva I didn't care about what they had been arguing about, and that she wasn't allowed to disrespect Charlie or Eric like that. Me and Eva ended up now being the ones to start arguing, but I soon shut it down when I realized it wasn't gonna help. I forced her to apologize and took away her car privileges until she could learn to respect her siblings, and I thought it was the end of that. Well, the next morning after work I ended up coming home and finding scraps of papers all over. At first I didn't get it, but then soon found out that she cut up about half a dozen letters her mother had written me when I was much younger. I was livid. I know it was her because I have a couple cameras in my house. I just walked into her room and told her to get out. She was smug and rolled her eyes, but then I yelled, "Get the out of my house," and she realized I was serious. She was crying and screaming, but I had felt sorta numb at that point, and she left with a friend of hers. But now I feel like I was being too harsh, but I wanna stand my ground. She did know about the cameras, but they're really just there for my dog. My brother lost his job along with all his savings several months ago, and soon after he asked me if it would be okay if he and his wife stayed with me until they could afford their own place again. I hesitated at first, considering I only have a one-bedroom apartment, but according to them they had no other options, so of course I invited them over and bought a blow-up mattress for the living room. For the first month things were manageable, although admittedly cramped. Then my brother told me that sleeping on the mattress was giving him back pains. So he asked if he could buy a small double bed for the living room. The living room is by far the biggest room I have, so I told him that would be fine as long as there was still room for my couch, TV, bookshelves. The living room is also connected to my kitchen in an open plan style. So I reminded my brother to leave walking space around the bed. It's now been 2 months and things have gotten a lot worse. When they first moved in, I would still use the living room every day to unwind on the couch after work. Now whenever I go in, there's a strange vibe, like I'm intruding. My brother and his wife are often sitting in bed together when I go in. I always knock and stare at me pointedly until I leave. Sometimes when I sit down they will directly ask me for some alone time and say they would like the room to themselves. This came to a head yesterday when my sister-in-law messaged me with a timetable she'd made of when it would be a good time for me to use the living room. The timetable basically says that they will allow me into the room for an hour each evening, plus 20 minutes around meal times. I basically shut her down instantly and told her there was no way I'd be following the timetable, since in the end it's my apartment. She sent me back a huge message with a dozen paragraphs about how my constant presence was ruining her marriage with my brother and they feel like they have no privacy. I tried to talk this over with my brother that night, but when I got home neither my brother /SIL were talking to me. So he's clearly just as pissed. Today an Amazon parcel arrived for my brother with a lock for the living room door, which I told him there's absolutely no way I will allow him to install. My brother says I'm creepy for wanting constant access to where they sleep and he's insisting on installing the lock anyway.